Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's Lunch and Learn session. Today's topic is on accounts payable, routing, and approvals with presenter Vivian Frazier. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone will be in listen-only mode, so if you have questions, please type them into the questions box on the screen, and we will address them at the end of the session. If you need to step away, please do not put your phone on hold. If you have hold music, it will play for all the attendees, like you just heard. This webinar will be recorded, and we will email out a copy to everyone within a few days. I will now turn it over to you, Vivian.
Thanks, Krista, and welcome, everybody. I'm going to get started here with our agenda. Okay, today's agenda is going to include a brief overview of the TimberScan workflow. There's a few items under setup and workflow that we're going to focus on, specifically auto-approve, the auto-approve feature for vendors and GL accounts. We're going to talk about the order of documents. We're going to talk about accrual, setup, and processing. And then we'll give you a couple of tips on filtering invoices and holding invoices to help improve your workflow. Last, I'm going to talk about some reports and inquiries, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bernard, who's going to talk about some upcoming new modules, and then we'll have a few minutes for some questions and answers. So at this point, my next slide is this is a chart of the workflow of TimberScan. Basically, you start with scanning the invoices in, and you can scan them from a location out on your network. You can browse out directly to a location on your network. You can also just drag and drop a file from your network or from within an email. So if a vendor sends you invoices via email, you can just drag and drop them directly into TimberScan without having to download them first and then put them into TimberScan. So that's kind of a nice feature that allows the workflow to go a little bit more smoothly. After they're acquired, you go through the coding process, and so the coding process will now is now done in TimberScan, but it looks very similar to Timberline. The order of... Hello? I'm sorry, somebody talking?
Sorry, Vivian, keep going. That was perfect.
Oh, okay. I heard something. I wasn't sure if I needed to stop. Sorry about that. Okay, so the coding is done in TimberScan, and the fields look very similar. The order of fields is just like in Timberline. The lists are the same as in Timberline. The warnings are the same. So the feeling and the look of your screen for coding is just the same in TimberScan as it is in Timberline. Now, based on that coding, and usually the job field most often, okay, the system will take that criteria, like I said, mostly the job field, and it will send the images of the invoices to approvers based on the coding and the rules that you have set up. And you can have multiple levels of approvers, and those multiple levels of approvers may have thresholds, so that higher level approvers don't have to see every $10 invoice. You can set a threshold, say anything over $5,000, $10,000, or whatever number it is that you decide that somebody should see invoices of, above that amount. After the last approver sees the invoices, it'll go through a final review process, which is generally the accounting group, and then after that they'll export into Timberline, where they'll be approved, ready to pay, and viewable right from within Timberline. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the workflow. So now I'm going to go into the software and show you a couple of things. Okay, so auto-approve. If you want to kind of streamline your process and you have specific accounts in your general ledger or vendors that you that don't need specific approval, that don't need to be seen by a specific person, you can actually go into here and you get your whole list of GL accounts here. And let's say I have utilities. I have my GL utilities account. And I can set this account up as an auto-approve account, which basically means that any invoice within TimberScan that is coded to this account will not be routed to any individual for approval. It will just go straight to final review, and the image will be there, but it will just go right to final review and go into Timberline ready for payment, and it won't have to go through any kind of an approval process. So it'll make the process go much quicker. Same thing with auto-approve vendors, okay? You can set up a vendor as an auto-approve vendor, all right? In addition to that, you can set a threshold for that vendor so that, say, this $10,000, anything up to that amount will be auto-approved. As soon as the system sees that vendor, it'll just send it right to final review. Anything above that dollar amount would go through the normal approval process. Okay, so that's auto-approve. Under settings, there's a little feature here that I'd like to show people, and that is the document assembly order. This default order in TimberScan is invoices, supporting documents, and checks. All right, you can actually change the order so that checks will assemble in your images first. So even though that might be checks or something that you attach after an invoice has been through the approval process and after supporting documents have been assigned, it's the last thing, obviously, that's done. And after you attach it, you know, in your physical check filing, you typically attach the check right to the top. So I've had a lot of clients who kind of like that, because then down the road when they do go in and view that particular invoice, the check actually comes up first, just like it would if you were to physically find that invoice in a file, and you can see right immediately that it was paid with that check because it's the first document that comes up, rather than having to scroll through to the end and looking at the check at the end of your documents within that image, within that invoice image. So that's kind of a nice feature that I'd like to point out to people. So you would change that in system settings here, save it, and then from this point forward, it assembles invoices in that order. Okay, so let's talk about accruals now. Your month-end process in TimberScan, it can include accruals if you choose to, okay? Not everybody does their accruals every month, but if you do them even once a quarter or once a year, okay, you may have invoices within TimberScan as of the end of a particular month that have not made it into Timberline yet. So when you're closing that month in Timberline, you're going to want to accrue those invoices potentially in TimberScan so that you at least have those dollars in Timberline and your numbers are more accurate. First, you need to do the settings for the accruals in TimberScan. And what TimberScan will do is it will actually create and send over a journal entry, a file that you can import that's a journal entry. From TimberScan to Timberline. Okay, so you need to tell the system in your settings, you need to tell the system how you want it to accumulate that journal entry as far as the coding goes. Okay, so there's two types of invoices in TimberScan. That would be your completed invoices, which are fully coded, and then your incomplete invoices, which are the ones that are not completely coded yet. So for your job cost accruals and your GL accruals, you would tell it for completed invoices whether you want to use the actual invoice values and the coding that's already there, or if you want to use some other default value. Okay, so if you use default values, you would need to tell it the default values in these menus, in these fields here. And then for the incomplete invoices, you would tell it whether you want to accrue them or use default values there as well. So once you set up the accounts and the criteria by which it will create the journal entry, you would save this. Okay. And then we'll go into the workflow, and under the utilities menu, you would go to accrue invoices, and you get this menu, or you get this window that allows you to put in the dates for your cutoff. So you tell it what period you're accruing, tell it whether you want to reverse the entries and give it the period in which you want to reverse them, and then you can actually have the system change the accounting date from inside of TimberScan. Okay, the invoices that are now dated 5/31 that are being accrued, you want the accounting date on those invoices to be changed, because if they import or they export into Timberline with the 5/31 accounting date and they've been accrued, obviously they're going to be double counted at 5/31. So you want the invoices now to have a new accounting date of 6/1, and then it'll also close the period. So you can have all of these items done within this one feature here. So as you're accruing the invoices here, you would compile them. I already have some invoices compiled here, so I'm going to just go straight to review. After it compiles them based on this date criteria, all right, I'm going to then take a look. I'm going to review all my invoices. I can pick and choose. If there's some that I decide that I don't want to accrue for whatever reason, I can uncheck them. Okay? And once I do that, and they're fully reviewed, I can click on the Accrue button, and this is my file that I can save anywhere out there on my network that I can then import into Timberline, okay, for job cost and also for general ledger. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so now a couple of items that I want to show you that are that'll help you during your workflow, whether you're a data entry person or an approver. You have a couple of queues. You have a primary queue, and you have a held invoices queue. Okay, so what I want to show you is kind of a couple of different ways of using those queues. When you go into, see, I've got 86 invoices in my primary queue. One of the ways to help you filter those invoices, if you open up that queue, you get a whole list of 86 invoices. You may not want to work on all of those 86 invoices. If you're a data entry person and you've just recently entered or acquired some invoices, then those won't be coded. Okay, some of the other invoices in your 86 might already be coded. You don't want to work on those. You just want to work on the new ones. So you might select the invoices not yet coded. You might also just want to look at the invoices that have just been rejected. Maybe there's a specific vendor you want to look at invoices for. If you're an approver, you might want to look at invoices just for a specific job, because say you only have 5 minutes and you want to get a few things, you know, a few things done, okay? So if I look at invoices for a specific, let's say I want to look at a specific invoice type, and those are the priority invoices. So of my 86 invoices, if I look at just the priority ones, I'll get a list of, and you see here, my warning is coming up just like it does in Timberline. Okay, there's all my warnings. Okay, and I'm going to show you, I just have to redo this here because the top of the screen here doesn't show. So now I've got one invoice. I've got one priority invoice out there that I want to focus on. So rather than having to search through all those 86, I'm finding the one priority invoice that I want to focus on, and then I can process it as needed. Here is the data entry screen that I mentioned earlier. It is in order the same as Timberline, and it looks just like Timberline. Now at this point, I might want to, depending on where I am with an invoice, if I've got it fully coded but there's a piece of information that I'm waiting for, I can actually use the hold queue. This hold is not the same hold as in Timberline. It does not hold it for payment. It's a separate hold within TimberScan. It actually is more like moving the invoice from one pile into another. So if I want to hold it, I can put in a comment here that tells it what I'm waiting for. So when I go out, I can go back into my hold queue, and I can see that I've got 5 invoices on hold, and this one is waiting for a W-9. All right, these are my notes that I put in when I put it on hold. So you can move things into a hold queue that'll help separate them from your primary queue and allow you to streamline your workflow process. Okay, so I'm going to look at some inquiry right now. So I'm going to go into the job cost inquiry. Okay, now within an inquiry you can look at invoices that are in TimberScan or in Timberline. Okay, I'm going to look at stuff that's in Timberline, and I'm going to look at information for selected jobs. I'm going to pick this job, and I'm going to say OK, and it tells me that there's 41 records, and here's my inquiry. So in this inquiry, you can select different columns. Okay, so you can turn certain columns on and off so that the report or the inquiry shows just the information that you want. I can sort by any column by ascending or descending order, vendor, amount, ascending and descending, things like statuses. Okay, I can filter for a specific status and look at just my fully paid items. Okay, in addition to that, I can print the grid, I can export it to Excel, I can do a report. So right from within here, okay, I'm going to give each, you can give each report a unique name and a subtotal, or I'm sorry, a subheader name. Okay, I'm going to actually send this report to an Adobe Acrobat file. I'm going to include all pages of the invoice, and I'm going to include reports and images all in one file. I'm also going to group it by vendor. okay, which is going to give me subtotals by vendor. I can actually send the report and images all to separate PDF files if that's what I want to do. Okay, so I'm going to say OK here, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to say yes, and the length of time it takes for this report to run will depend on how much information you have in this inquiry and how many images there are. So, of course, the more images there are, the longer the report will take to compile and get prepared. This is going to complete fairly quickly here, and once it does, I'm going to minimize it and run in here real quick and show you the report. Okay, so here's my report. It's got vendor totals. You can scroll through. At the end, I've got a total, and then you start seeing the images. There are my images and their approval pages in the order that they are listed on the report. Okay, and there's a check that's also attached. All right, so I'm going to go out of this report for a second, show you one more quick thing in the inquiry. Okay, in this inquiry, you can actually, if you see this little bar right above the headings here, you take one of your column headers and move it up into that bar. It's a grouping area. So I can group my inquiry by vendors, and then maybe I want to do a secondary grouping, so I can bring in status. And I can see the open and fully paid items within each vendor here. Okay, so that's those are fully paid and so on and so forth. Okay, and then I can keep opening each thing so that I can see the invoices. Okay, so those are some cool features that are within the inquiry and reports area. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Bernard. I'm going to make him the presenter, and he's going to talk about some new features that are coming up. Here you go, Bernard. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for this opportunity. There's a couple of things I want to show you that's coming out in the very near future with TimberScan. TimberScan initially was created as a product that will automate the AP approval process, which is the biggest pain point for most companies. And of course, with the automated AP approval process, we created an excellent supporting document workflow for TimberScan so that any receiving tickets, packing slips, lien waivers, manifests can be attached to the invoice to help with the approval process. Now, one thing that clients have been asking us for a long time is, what about all of our other documents? And I'm happy to report that we now have expanded TimberScan so that TimberScan can handle all your document types. This is a module that's in beta test right now, and we expect it to be released for general distribution in August-September timeframe. So we call this module that expands TimberScan to handle all your document types AIM, which stands for Advanced Image Management. And it's a program that will easily allow you to create an unlimited user-defined document types, categories, and indexes. It allows for the index search and retrieval of any document in a secure vault. It provides security so that sensitive documents can be secured both at the document type and the document category. It also provides flexible searches, and just like TimberScan right now will save documents inside of Timberline, AIM will also save documents inside of Timberline. So if you have a change order that you're saving as a change order, it would be right in Timberline under that change order or that drawing or that RFI or that payroll document. So the workflow is you acquire the document, you classify it, and then you can distribute it if you like. Right now, we have email built in for manual distribution, but by the end of the year, we're going to be able to expand this so that you can create routing rules for your distributions as well. So if you have a routing rule for a purchase order or a change order or a check or a payroll document, you'll be able to create the routing rules and it'll automatically route it to the right person. And then, of course, it's going to store it, and it's going to fully integrate with Timberscan. So I'm going to show you that, and then I'm going to show you a couple other items that we've created. So first of all, from a setup perspective, we have AIM capabilities. So documents can be in a category, which is a broad group, and then under the category there's types. So when you initially set this up, you can set up an unlimited number of categories. I set up AP, custom categories, job cost, payroll, project management, property management, cash management, so on and so forth. You can set up as many categories as you want. The reason for categories is to make it easier to identify the different types. Now, when I set up categories, I can also have security on a particular category. So if I have, here's all my payroll users, here's all my users, and if I only want to have Andrew be able to access payroll records, I can set up security at the category level. Now you can also, the key to the program, of course, is the types. So as you go into the various types, you can set up all the different documents that you want under the types. So under AP, I've got W-9s, I've got insurance certificates, I've got workers' comp certificates, and I can set up as many different types. I can also set them up under job cost, under payroll, under property management, project management, so on and so forth. So I can set up all kinds of different types. Again, on the types, I can also set up security. So if I am, for example, in job costs and I want to create a new type, I can just add the type and I give it a name. And let's say this is under job cost. You can let's say it's going to be a drawing. And then once you define what it is, you can specify where do you want to link it in Timberline. So if you want to link it to the job record, or if you want to link it to the cost code record, or the commitment record, or the change order record, you can link it to any record. And when you link it to a record, it automatically creates the index. And then you can add additional indexes to it as well. So I can add index for date, for description, for amount, and any other index. I can also have a document saved in two places. So if I want this drawing saved under the job record, but I also want to save it under the vendor record, I can go under the vendor record and also attach it under the vendor record, and it'll be saved in two places. So very powerful tool to create your document types. And then, of course, you can have security under each document type. So if you have a, say, a bank statement, you may want to specify who's allowed to see that statement. And you can also have documents that have nothing to do with Timberline at all, private documents. So once you set that up, then it's really a simple process. You go in and you acquire a document. So you go into acquire just like you do each time. And now we have an invoice type called AIM documents. And when you open up an AIM document, you can see all the different types of AIM documents. And let's say I want to grab this drawing. I can open it up. I can grab a bunch of documents and process them. And once I process the document, all I have to do to get that document into the system is go into AIM and categorize it. So here's my drawing, and I'm going to categorize that under job cost, and I'm going to categorize that under drawing. And then it asks me what job do I want to categorize this to. I'll choose my job. I can put in the description. And I put in my date. And you can have as many of these index these as you require. You can also email these if you need additional approvals on it. You can print them out. You can add comments. And then once you're satisfied with it, you can save it, in which case it's then part of the system. And now to look things up, you can look things up inside of Timberline, or you can look things up inside of TimberScan. So if I go into my search engine and I want to look for, let's say, all my job cost documents, I can categorize them by a specific type, or I can put conditions on it. So I can say, okay, I want to see all my job cost documents that are equal to a specific job. And of course, you can put multiple categories in your search. And when you have a search, you can actually save it to do it next time. And then when you create the search, here's all your documents. And you can see details on the document, and you can view the document. So here's an example of a change order. And what we're doing is we're expanding TimberScan to give you more functionality. One other thing that we're doing is, besides the AIM module, we also now have an AP automation tool, which we call Capture. And what Capture does is it will take an invoice that you've scanned and OCR that invoice, turn that invoice into text. It'll allow you, for each vendor, to identify the key data entry elements of that invoice, like the vendor name, the invoice number, the date, the amount. And when you do that once, it memorizes the invoice structure. Then going out into the future, when you scan invoices, those invoices that are already defined will not require the initial data entry. They will flow into data entry automatically. So if after you've got the system up and running, if you've got 40 or 50 invoices that you're processing and 47 of them are already defined, they're ready for data entry. And then the 2 or 3 that aren't defined yet, you can define them and then have them ready for data entry. So we're very excited about that module as well. So I'm just going to sign on to that, to the version of the program that has that module, and show you how that works. It's a great tool. So this is an automation tool. So when we acquire, we've added a few more acquire options. If you have handwritten invoices that are, or invoices that are very poor quality, that any OCR text document text function is never going to be able to realize those invoices or read those invoices, you can just acquire them and then just do the data entry. But any invoices that you want the system to automatically acquire, you're going to acquire through acquire OCR images. Now, when you initially get the system, typically what's going to happen is you're going to go into OCR templates. And you're probably going to choose your 20, 30, 40 most common invoices and define them first. And when you define an invoice, you give the invoice a name. So here is Baldwin Painting, and this is how an invoice is set up. It's very simple and straightforward. So now, one of the issues with invoices, which you all know, is that not all invoices have invoice numbers. And obviously, Timberline requires a unique invoice number for every vendor. So the way we handle that is we allow you to create an invoice naming convention. If the invoice is coming, if the invoice number is coming from the invoice, that's the default. But if you have statements that come that don't have invoice numbers, you can choose one of these 3 different conventions to automate that process. One convention is using year, date, time. Another convention is using, year, month, date numbering sequence, or year, month numbering sequence, or just a numbering sequence. And it's going to remember that. So let's say Baldwin doesn't have an invoice number. If you choose this and you start incrementing at 001, after the second invoice, it's going to be 02, 03, 04. It automatically takes care of the naming convention. Now, the other thing that you have to do with any invoice is what we call select anchors. Now, with scanning is never going to be perfect. You may scan a document, and one time it may be 1/4 of an inch higher, another time it will be 1/4 of an inch lower. So by identifying data on the invoice, which we call anchors at the top and the bottom, it makes scanning very, very much more accurate, because it's scanning. It knows that the invoice number is this many pixels from this part, not from the top of the invoice. So the first thing you do is you just identify the top and the bottom of the invoice as far as readable data goes. Then the next thing you want to do is identify you want to select the identifier of the invoice. Now, an identifier of the invoice is going to link to the vendor name, and it's something that you want on the invoice that's unique. That's never going to change on any invoice. So I picked the telephone number of the company. I could have picked their website. I could have picked their email address. Anything that won't change. And once you identify the vendor, you then can say that when an invoice is read and it finds this telephone number, it belongs to Baldwin Paint. And it's got Baldwin Paint's number there. So that's pretty straightforward. After you do that, there's just a couple things to identify. You identify where the invoice number is. You identify where the date is. You identify where the balance is. And once you're done and you save that, then whenever you scan another invoice for Baldwin Paint, it'll automatically be saved. Once you scanned a bunch of invoices, this is the way they're going to come into TimberScan. They're going to come in pre-coded. So here, this invoice for Baldwin Paint is already pre-coded. It gives me a warning because it knows the vendor and the invoice number. This warning is coming from Timberline that their insurance is not there. And the other thing that we've done to make things easier is once we've coded the invoice, we also color code it to the data entry. So it makes it very easy for the eye to verify the invoice number, the date, the amount, the description. So it makes it very easy. And then all you have to do is complete the coding. Now, if the invoice has a commitment number, the likelihood is that, well, definitely the commitment number will be there on the invoice, and it'll be even more coded than if you're just picking up the header information. So this is designed to save you a lot of time for data entry. And just a couple other things that are coming down the pike that I want to make you aware of. We're also coming out with a report designer. So fourth quarter, we'll have a report designer. We'll be able to create custom reports for TimberScan and for AIM. We're coming out with a scheduler, which will automatically send reports, notifications, emails, text messages to anyone based on preset conditions. So it's kind of like a mini My Assistant. And we're also coming out with the AIM workflow engine, which will create routing rules and workflows for any type of document. So we're really busy enhancing the TimberScan product, and I think that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, just please free to ask.
Okay, we have one question so far. We are currently using document management to scan in our commitments. Will TimberScan add that to the check backup when it pulls the backup it attaches to the check?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. We are currently using document management to scan in our commitments. Will TimberScan add that to the check backup when it pulls the backup it attaches to the check?
Only if you acquire that document. It's not going to do it automatically from document management. Only if you acquire that document as a supporting document, then it would be attached.
If anyone else has any other questions, please type them into the questions box, and we'll be happy to answer them. Just wait a minute. Here's another one. When you email an approval request, how do you receive or know that you have received an approval?
Well, the system automatically emails approval requests. So if accounting just processed 50 invoices and 10 were for approver A would get one email notification automatically without the person having to do anything else, telling them that they got 10 new invoices to approve. There's also a report within TimberScan which is going to tell you all your approvers, what invoices they have, and how long they've had them. Now, the idea of the scheduler is to become proactive. So if you set a condition that you want to know, or you want your approvers to know, or both, of all invoices that are more than 15 days old or 20 days old or whatever the criteria is, the scheduler will automatically send out emails and notifications to either management or the approver based on the condition that's set up in the scheduler. So right now you just have to go into a report to find out who's still holding invoices. But with the scheduler, it'll automatically tell you and tell the approver as well. Did I answer your question? Okay, go ahead.
Well, they can't speak. They can only type it in.
Yeah.
The next question is, does TimberScan have cash forecast reports for approving check runs?
No.
No, you'd run those out of Timberline. But you can run a report to show you all the invoices, all the open invoices in Timberline, and all the invoices in the approval process to see what your exposure is or what's due. So there are reports where you can easily run a report to see what's been committed already. Not necessarily approved, not necessarily in Timberline, but it will combine all the open invoices in Timberline plus all the invoices that are still in the approval process to give you an idea for cash flow planning. Wouldn't you say, Vivian?
Yes, yes, that would be a very good way to do that. Absolutely, you're right.
Okay, we have no other questions at this time.
Great.
So,
well, I think,
if anyone, go ahead.
I think there's going to be, or are you going to mention this about the demo coming up for TimberScan?
Yes, we have. If anyone wants to see TimberScan in more depth and the new features and everything, we have a demo coming up on June 20th, and it's right on our website under events, and I'll also include it in the follow-up email with the recording of this presentation later today. So we have one more question, Bernard. We have a large number, we have a large volume of credit card receipts that have to be input. Does TimberScan handle them like the vendor invoices?
We do have a workflow for credit card receipts. So there is a method of doing it. It's not highly automated, but there is a workflow. A lot of people obviously have credit card receipts in this day and age, so we do have a method of handling them.
Okay,
and there's a white paper on that, so certainly we can send that to you.
Okay, well, it looks like that's all the questions we have. So again, this webinar will be emailed out to everybody later today, as well as the demonstration coming up if you are interested in attending. We want to thank you all again for attending today's session, and have a great day.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.